Alright, so you want to play Mana Tank? So far, League 3 has been pretty fun. Between the new spells, Mystic Enchantments, and the caster talent rework, there's a ton of new stuff I'm really excited to try. However, the spell I've been most excited for has gotta be Manaforge Barrier. This new tanking stance allows spell tanks, arguably my favorite build on Ascension, to be a competitive option in the endgame. So before anything else, I had to try it out. And thankfully, it's really good. Moving into the build's core breakdown, let's cover the major enablers. First and foremost, Manaforge Barrier is what allows this build to actually work. It reads, depending on your mana percentage, you'll absorb 90 to 40% of an attack's damage, draining 1 point of mana per point of damage absorbed. Additionally, you're also protected against most interrupt effects that stop an ongoing cast. Also, the threat you generate from magic attacks is significantly increased. However, your damage and healing is reduced by 50%. Manaforge Barrier essentially transforms your mana into health, allows you to hardcast spells without getting kicked, and causes you to generate a ton of threat exclusively through magic damage. All of these effects are exactly what a spell tank wants, so don't skip out on Manaforge Barrier as it's really important to the build. Due to Manaforge Barrier's first effect, the build heavily relies upon spells, talents, and REs that generate you a ton of mana. In my gameplay, I found Blessing of Sanctuary, Aspect of the Viper, and Invocation to account for roughly 60% of my mana regen, while the talents, Master of Elements, Power Surge, and Spiritual Attunement account for a further 30% of my total mana regen. Because of this, I generally recommend most Manaforge Barrier builds consider these spells and talents as they're incredibly efficient. As for the build's legendary, I personally run Mana Fiend. The exclusive reason behind this is for that sweet 15% intellect buff. In fact, I recommend you specifically not enter the Mana Crazed Delirium, as that'll drain your mana temporarily and reduce the damage absorption provided by Manaforge Barrier. So when playing my version of this build, I would actively avoid auto-attacking in general unless you're off-tanking. As another option, you could run Eldritch Knight, which causes your auto-attacks to generate mana. This RE is also really strong, but I personally find it less interesting to use, so I take Mana Fiend instead. As for the build's rotation, you'll mainly be casting Arcane Explosion to hold aggro. Yes, even in single target. Otherwise, Sunfire and Hand of Reckoning can help you quickly pull mob packs. If you find yourself low in mana, pop Evocation or use Arcane Blast to trigger the Power Surge talent. This quickly restores 12% of your missing mana. If you're taking a ton of damage and low on mana, you'll want to cast Invocation. Not only will this grant you the 90% damage absorption provided by Manaforge Barrier, but it'll also give you mana equal to the damage you took while channeling. Outside of that, make sure to pop defensive cooldowns when you're in danger, and refresh Lightning Shield whenever it goes down. Regardless of the rotation, if you can master your mana and keep it actively topped off, you'll become essentially unkillable with this build. Moving on to the build spells, I'll be covering each ability by rarity, and highlight any spell alternatives that are worth considering. At common, I have Arcane Blast, Arcane Explosion, Hand of Reckoning, and Moonfire. Arcane Blast is used primarily to trigger the Power Surge talent. Arcane Explosion is your general threat spell. And finally, Moonfire allows you to pick up the epic RE, Sunfire. Also worth considering here is Challenging Shout for an AoE taunt. For uncommon spells, I take Arcane Intellect, Power Word Fortitude, Retribution Aura, and Blessing of Sanctuary. Arcane Intellect provides mana, Power Word Fortitude is health, Retribution Aura is actually a pretty good Thorns effect, and Blessing of Sanctuary is an integral and super important mana regen buff. Moving into rare, I take Aspect of the Viper, Evocation, Fell Armor, Invocation, Lightning Shield, and Molten Armor. Aspect of the Viper is yet another critical mana regen buff that you want to keep active 24/7. Fell Armor is a passive healing buff that can trigger from Arcane Explosion. Evocation lets you generate a huge chunk of mana when needed. Invocation functions as both a mana generator and an active mitigation spell that, when combined with the Power Surge talent, grants you mana equal to the damage you took while channeling. Lightning Shield generates a ton of threat, especially when combined with the Static Shock talent for double procs. And finally, Molten Armor is a ridiculously good Thorns effect that also reduces your chance to be critically hit, both great effects for a spell tank. Some good alternatives here are Seal of Wisdom, Judgment of Wisdom, and Brilliance Aura. These are especially great if you took Eldritch Knight over Mana Fiend, as you'll be actively auto-attacking. Next are epics. I take Bark Skin, Charge, Combat Readiness, Evasion, Mana Shield, and Manaforge Barrier. Arc Skin is one of my favorite defensive cooldowns. It works off the global cooldown and is castable even while CC'd. Charge is a great gap closer. Combat Readiness is a defensive cooldown. Evasion is also a defensive cooldown, but it also generates mana from Blessing of Sanctuary as it gives you dodge chance. Mana Shield allows you to beef up your defense, mainly when you have a lot of mana to spare. And finally, Manaforge Barrier is your tanking stance. If you'd prefer some utility, also worth considering here are Kick, Cleanse, and Capacitor Totem. Last but not least, for legendaries, I have Demonic Leap, Smoke Bomb, and Unending Resolve. I really love using Demonic Leap. If I had to choose my favorite thing from the league, it would 100% be Demonic Leap. Smoke Bomb creates a temporary line of sight, which is crazy good at line of sighting caster mobs. In Mythic Plus, Smoke Bomb is honestly invaluable. Finally, Unending Resolve is a fairly simple 30% damage reduction and silence immunity buff. Also worth considering here are Divine Protection, Dispersion, or Starfall. For Mystic Enchantments, Mana Fiend is my legendary, but for epics, I take Sunfire, Defensive Magic, and Blaze Ward. Sunfire transforms Moonfire into an AoE spell that can pull full packs of mobs at ranged. I wouldn't say Sunfire is especially key to the build, but it's a lot of fun to use when you're chain pulling mobs in a dungeon. Defensive Magic, on the other hand, is super important to the build. With it, you're able to block, dodge, and parry attacks while casting and channeling. Not taking this RE will make you significantly less tanky, as you won't be able to mitigate damage while casting Arcane Blast or channeling Invocation, spells you'll be using basically all the time. Finally, good old Blaze Ward. Essentially, all this does is give you a passive AoE fire damage proc whenever you get hit or mitigate an attack. Although simple, I'm really fond of this RE and it's been fairly strong, so I keep it around as well. Moving to lower rarity REs, I have Master of Elements, Rebout, Spiritual Attunement, Arcane Shielding, Precision, and Arcane Fulmination. Master of Elements increases the mana gained from the respectively named talent. Rebout also increases the proc chance of its talent, boosting its uptime. Spiritual Attunement transforms 12% of the effective healing you receive into mana. Arcane Shielding reduces the mana lost by Mana Shield by 0.6, making it less costly to use. Precision is hit chance. And finally, Arcane Fulmination increases the threat you generate from arcane spells by 30%. With that, let's move on to talents. Here, I'll be categorizing talents into either support or defensive, depending on their effect. For support talents, I take Aspect Mastery, Death's Grasp, Master of Elements, Power Surge, Spiritual Attunement, and Static Shock. Aspect Mastery reduces the damage penalty from Aspect of the Viper by 20%. This makes it less punishing to use as you'll keep it active 24/7. Death's Grasp is hit chance. Master of Elements lets you generate mana from your spell criticals, mainly Arcane Explosion. Power Surge lets Arcane Blast and Invocation generate a ton of mana. Spiritual Attunement turns healing received into mana. And finally, Static Shock is a fantastic threat generation talent that lets Lightning Shield trigger from your attacks. As for defensive talents, I take Anticipation, Arcane Fortitude, Arcane Mind, Arcane Shielding, Ardent Defender, Ghost-like Reflexes, Heart of the Wild, Improved Power with Fortitude, Mental Strength, Rebout, and Shield Specialization. Anticipation increases your chance to block as well as the amount of damage you can block. Arcane Mind increases your intellect by 10%, boosting your mana. Arcane Fortitude turns 300% of your intellect into armor, plus grants your Clothgear 30% more armor. Arcane Shielding further reduces Mana Shield's mana cost, bringing it down to a 0.4 mana per point of damage absorbed. Ardent Defender reduces the damage you take at low health and saves you against a potentially lethal attack. Ghost-like Reflexes helps compensate for a low defense rating by reducing your chance to be critically hit. Heart of the Wild grants you 9% intellect for even more mana. Improved Power with Fortitude is 4% stamina. Mental Strength is another 10% intellect buff. Rebout is similar to Anticipation, granting you both block chance and value. And finally, Shield Specialization grants you 10% block chance, letting you trigger Blessing of Sanctuary significantly more often. Before I end off, I wanted to quickly talk about gearing for this build, simply because there is a lot of items worth considering, so I'll try my best to point you in the right direction. If it wasn't obvious yet, your primary stat is going to be Intellect, as it increases your mana pool. Therefore, you'll want to find gear with both Intellect and Stamina for the highest amount of defense stats. Otherwise, be on the lookout for hit rating, defense rating, and block value. As for armor types, you can really wear whatever. Cloth, leather, mail and plate all work just fine. Just make sure the item has the correct stance you're looking for. And that does it for my guide on Manaforge Barrier. I really enjoyed making this build, and I hope you have as much fun trying it out as I did. Otherwise though, that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching and have a good one.